6 months. That is roughly how long the retirement honeymoon lasts when you actually choose your exit date. Pack that away, because if you were forced out, through redundancy, ill health, or looking after a parent, that honeymoon is already gone before you even sit down to enjoy it. Here is the number nobody puts on the leaflet. Skip the honeymoon and you land straight in what most guides call the rebuild phase, the part where you figure out who you are without the job. For people who did not choose their exit, that rebuild typically comes with close to £12,000 in unplanned spending or lost income in the first year. Money you did not budget for, spent trying to fill a gap nobody warned you about. Most retirement plans are built for a version of you that does not exist if this is your situation. The happy retiree who picks a date 18 months out, tells the office, has a leaving due and eases into it. If you got a phone call instead of a leaving due, that plan skips straight past you, and so does the identity crash that follows it, along with the 3 financial mistakes that tend to show up next. I will be honest, I used to hand out the same advice everyone else does. Congratulations, you are free. Enjoy it. Then I sat across from a man who had been made redundant at 58, and he told me it felt like someone had switched off a light in a room he used to live in. That conversation is the reason this video exists. Today I am going to walk you through the 90-day plan that protects both your money and your sense of self when retirement was not something you chose. That £12,000 at risk, we will deal with it properly. But first, let us look at the number the industry does not put in front of you and why it probably includes you. If you are heading toward retirement, whether you get to choose the date or the date chooses you, hit subscribe now. I am Arthur, and this channel is for people who want to retire on their own terms even when life had other plans. Start with the number that probably includes you. Roughly 43% of UK retirees leave work earlier than they had planned to. That is not a rounding error. That is close to half the people watching this right now who never actually got to pick their own leaving date. And here is the part that stings more. People who were forced out are about 2.3 times more likely to report a real drop in how satisfied they feel with life during that first year, compared with people who chose their own timing. Before you decide that does not apply to you because you feel fine, hold that thought. Most people in that 43% felt fine too, for the first few weeks. The drop tends to show up later, once the adrenaline of the situation wears off and the calendar just keeps being empty. We will come back to that. Let us do the maths on what this actually costs. Because it is not just a feeling, it shows up in the account balance too. The average UK pension pot at retirement sits around £95,000. When your exit is not planned, you typically lose out on roughly 8% of that, about £7,600, because contributions stop early and the pot starts being drawn down before it has had time to keep growing. Add what tends to happen next, the spending in the first few months that fills the emotional gap, averaging around £4,400. Put those together and you are looking at close to £12,000 that either never grew or got spent trying to feel normal again. Think about what £12,000 actually buys back in ordinary life. It is close to a year and a half of an average household's energy bills, or it covers a car most families budget to replace every 3 years. That is the scale of money quietly slipping away here, not in one dramatic mistake, but in 100 small ones nobody adds up until later. Here is why this happens, and it is not because anyone did anything wrong. Most pension planning, most retirement advice, assumes you are aiming for a target age, usually somewhere around 65 or later. If your job ends at 58, your pot was built on an assumption of 7 more years of contributions and growth that never arrived. The system is not punishing you. It simply was not built with your timeline in mind, and the cost of that gap does not stop at the £7,600 you lose this year. It compounds quietly in the background. Every pound that does not go in during your late 50s is a pound that does not get another 20 or 30 years to grow, so by the time you are 80, the gap between the planned path and the forced one is considerably wider than it looks today. This is not about you being careless or behind. It is about a system built for people who get a runway to prepare, when plenty of people get a phone call instead. Now you might be sitting there thinking, I never defined myself by my job. This identity stuff does not apply to me. That is almost exactly what most people in the forced exit group say, right up until the rebuild phase hits. Let me show you why. We tell ourselves a comforting line after a forced exit. I was never one of those people who lived for their job. That is probably even true. But what you actually lose when the job disappears usually is not identity. Not really. It is structure. It is the people who relied on you. It is having somewhere your presence was needed by 9 in the morning. It is completely normal to reject the idea that you are having some kind of identity crisis. You are not picturing yourself as a burnt-out executive from a leadership seminar. You are a plant supervisor, a nurse, a project manager, someone who got things done. But when the meetings stop, the deadlines stop, and nobody is messaging you asking where something is, your brain notices the silence even if your pride will not admit it does. That is the invisible cost here, and it does not show up on a bank statement. It is the slow drift into isolation that builds when nobody is expecting you anywhere in particular, and by the time you notice it, months have quietly gone by. Think about the ordinary rhythm you are replacing. Getting dressed for a reason. A commute, even a short one, that gave your day a shape before it properly started. A colleague who always had the kettle on when you walked in. Small things individually, but your week was built around dozens of them, and now it is not. There is no shame in the adjustment that follows. Plenty of people who retired entirely on their own terms, chosen date, leaving do and all, go through a version of this in the first few months too. The difference for you is that you did not get any warning it was coming, so there was no run-up, no gradual letting go. Here is a small shift that works better than trying to answer the big questions straight away. Stop asking, who am I without work? Ask instead, what did work actually give me week to week? Write the honest list, things like structure, people to talk to, a sense of being needed, a bit of mental challenge, and of course the income. Now pick one thing you could start tomorrow that covers at least 3 of those. It does not need to be grand. A volunteering shift, a regular class, helping out with a grandchild's school run on a fixed day, all of it counts. Replacing the job with a purpose statement does not work nearly as well as replacing it with a Tuesday. But here is where it gets harder for a lot of couples. If your partner is still going to work every morning while you are at home figuring this out, that structure gap does not stay the same size, it grows. That is the second trap worth talking about. Here is a version of this that catches couples off guard. One partner retires, forced or otherwise, and the other keeps going to work. Within a few months, guilt creeps in on both sides. The one at home starts feeling like they should be doing more, cooking every meal, running every errand, earning their keep somehow. The one still working starts quietly resenting the lie-in, even if they would never say it out loud. Financially, couples in this position often do one of 2 things. They overspend to make the time at home feel worth it, or they freeze completely because they cannot agree on what the new normal actually costs. Let us put a number on what that freeze or overspend can actually cost. Say one partner retires 5 years early at 58 while the other keeps working until 63. If that early retiree draws £15,000 a year from their pension during those 5 years to cover their share of household costs, that is £75,000 pulled out early. Left invested instead, growing at a modest 4% a year, that money would have been worth roughly £16,000 more after a decade. That is not a small gap. That is most of a car or a genuinely nice holiday every single year, given up quietly because nobody put a number on it at the start. This is where a bit of structure helps more than a conversation about feelings ever will. Call it the staggered retirement approach, and it has 3 parts. First, agree a fixed bridge amount, say £12,000 a year, that comes from savings specifically set aside for this, not from the main pension pot. That keeps the early retiree funded without quietly draining the money the working partner is still counting on. Second, put a weekly 15-minute check-in on the calendar, not to talk about money, just to talk about how the guilt and resentment are actually sitting that week. Third, the retired partner commits to one anchor activity that happens during the other's working hours, so the working partner is not coming home to someone who has been waiting all day. I do not know your marriage, and I would not presume to, but I have watched this exact pattern strain more relationships than almost anything else in this stage of life. This is not a fix-all, it is just a place to start. Take Sarah. She is 59, was a school administrator, made redundant not that long ago. She did not feel any dramatic identity loss at first. She told me she felt almost relieved. But by month 4, she had spent £3,200 on a kitchen renovation she had not planned and could not fully explain, even to herself. That is the version of this most people never plan for. What happens when 6 months have gone by and you are still not feeling settled? That is when the real financial mistakes tend to creep in. Sarah thought that £3,200 kitchen spend was just a slip, a moment of weakness. It was not. It was a signal. She did not need a new kitchen. She needed something to plan, manage and finish, the same way she used to plan a school term. Once you see that pattern, you start noticing it everywhere, and it splits into 3 specific mistakes. The first is overspending to feel alive again. New car, a cruise, maybe a second holiday if the redundancy payout was decent. It is not recklessness, it is your brain chasing the adrenaline that used to come from deadlines and problem solving. Across forced retirees, the average overspend in the first 9 months sits around £4,400. The fix is not to ban yourself from spending. That never sticks. Set a honeymoon budget instead, something like £3,000 for the first 6 months, spent deliberately on experiences rather than things. You still get the lift without wrecking your projections for the next 20 years. The second mistake runs in the opposite direction, underspending out of fear. This one gets far less attention because it looks responsible from the outside. After a forced exit, a lot of people become genuinely frightened of running out of money, so they stop spending on almost everything, including the small things that keep them connected to other people. Around 28% of forced retirees report spending nothing at all on non-essentials in that first year. That is not caution, that is isolation wearing a sensible coat. The fix here is a minimum joy budget, something like £150 a month, ring-fenced for the things that keep you connected, coffee with a friend, a weekly class, whatever it is for you. Treat it as non-negotiable as your council tax bill. It sounds small, £150 a month, but it is often the difference between still feeling part of the world and slowly, quietly disappearing from it. The third mistake is going back to work for the wrong reason. Boredom and the identity void push people into a job search within months, often for less money and less satisfaction than what they left. About 18% of retirees return to some kind of work within a year of stopping, and of those, roughly 60% later say they would have preferred to find a purpose outside of work instead. Before you send off a CV out of restlessness, try the 2-day rule. Fill 2 days a week with low-commitment activity, volunteering, a hobby group, mentoring someone younger for a full 2 months. If you still genuinely want paid work after that, take it, but make it part-time and make it something you would have chosen even if you did not need the money. Sarah's kitchen was not really the mistake. The mistake would have been not noticing what it was actually telling her all along. This is the part that actually matters most, the 90-day plan that protects your money and your sense of self when retirement was not something you picked. It is not about finding your true purpose in 90 days. Nobody manages that. It is about getting through the first 3 months without a mistake, financial or otherwise, that you will still be paying for next year. Days 1 to 30, call it the anchor phase. For the first 2 weeks, do genuinely less than feels comfortable. Rest properly, within reason. Then in week 3, pick one recurring activity, just one, that gives you structure, people, and a sense of being needed. Volunteering at a local charity shop twice a week is a fine example. So is helping out with a grandchild's school pickup on a fixed schedule. The financial rule for this month is simple. Do not touch your pension beyond what you already had planned, and do not make any purchase over £500. Days 31 to 60, the transition budget. Set a fixed monthly drawdown, something like £1,200 or whatever genuinely covers your essentials, plus that £150 joy budget from earlier. Having a number, even an imperfect one, does more for your peace of mind than an open-ended worry ever will. The rule here: no new debt and no lump sums pulled out of an ISA to cover a moment of restlessness. Days 61 to 90, the re-entry decision. Look honestly at the anchor activity you picked in week 3. Is it actually helping, or did you pick it out of obligation? If you are still feeling adrift, this is the point to consider part-time work, capped at 3 days a week, or a low-cost course in something you are curious about. If paid work is the route you choose, put the earnings straight into a SIP or an ISA rather than everyday spending that starts rebuilding the pension gap the early exit created. The reason this works is that it replaces the honeymoon you never got with something steadier. A gradual, low-risk transition instead of either a spending spree or a total freeze. There is one more piece to this, though, and it is the one people skip: the permission to actually do nothing for a while. There is a specific kind of guilt that shows up here, the feeling that every day of retirement needs to be productive, or you are wasting it. Forced retirees feel this more than anyone, because it can feel like you failed at something just by not working. You did not. What actually happened is, you were handed an enforced sabbatical you never asked for, and the first 90 days are for recovery, not reinvention. Try replacing the big question with a smaller one. Instead of asking what should I do with my life, ask what do I need today, just today. One thing, that is genuinely enough for now. I remember sitting in my own garden the week after my father was made redundant, staring at a hedge that did not need trimming yet. I did not do anything productive that afternoon. Some days, the right decision really is just to sit there. Most advisors will steer you straight to your withdrawal rate next, and that number does matter. We will get to it properly in another video. But your withdrawal rate will not help much if you are emotionally running on empty. So let us close with the one question that actually changes how this year goes for you. Let us bring this together. Roughly 43% of UK retirees did not get to choose their exit date. The 90-day plan gives you a steady landing instead of a honeymoon that never shows up. And the 3 mistakes to watch for along the way: overspending to feel alive, underspending out of fear, and going back to work for the wrong reason. The core idea underneath all of it is simple. When retirement was not your choice, you do not get the honeymoon, but you can still build a controlled landing. So here is the one question, and it deserves a real answer, not just a passing thought. If you could have one steady source of structure, people, and purpose built into your week, what would it actually be? Write it down and take the first small step toward it. Not the whole plan, just the first step. If you are navigating retirement right now, whether you chose it or it chose you, hit subscribe. I am Arthur. This channel exists to help you retire on your own terms, even when the world had other plans. I will see you in the next one.